Today on the show, I have the pleasure of speaking with Chris Miles. Chris is a cash flow expert and an anti-financial advisor. He's a leading authority teaching entrepreneurs and professionals about how to get their money working for them today. He's an author, podcast host, and he owns his own company called Money Ripples, which helps people achieve life-changing financial results. And in fact, his personal clients have increased their cash flow by over $200 million in the last 10 years. I'm really pumped and excited to have him on the show today to share his incredible insight and knowledge. But enough out of me. Let's get him out here. G'day, Chris. Welcome to the show. How are you today, mate?
Hey, thanks for having me on, man.
Mate, my pleasure. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of what you do and how you do it, do you want to rewind the clock and tell me about how you made your first ever dollar as a kid?
Yeah. The first time, I'd say my first real dollar as a kid was working for my mom, actually. My mom owned an art gallery, had a little art gallery that she had. So I was about 8 years old or so. And yeah, she's like, okay, if you want to have art classes, I'm not paying for you. So you got to earn your keep. So I was making a whopping $3.15 minimum wage per hour at that time, and did, cleaned out paint thinner cans and swept and mopped and all that kind of stuff that, I guess a few 8-year-olds do,
So helping mum around the art studio. I know my mum was also an artist. Never got paid for doing it. Just had to help her out. And I don't have an artistic bone in my body besides appreciating art. But it's funny how we've both grown up with artistic mums. And I don't know about yourself, but I'm not an artist. I'm more of that black and white mathematical brain.
I kind of buried my talent in that too. And now I'm more on the left brain versus the right. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Well, mate, walk us through, how you built what you've built. Did you go to university? Did you go to have a job and then all of a sudden had an epiphany one day and said, screw this and let's get into becoming an entrepreneur?
Sort of, actually. Yeah, that was pretty close. I actually went to university, and while I was not even a class, I was one project away from getting my bachelor's. I was getting my bachelor's in sociology with a potential triple minor in Japanese, psychology, and ballroom dancing.
Wow.
So
sounds like you had a fun university.
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually why I picked it, because I was actually one of the nation's top amateur ballroom dancers at the time.
Ah, okay.
So I was doing that, but I dropped out because my intention was to become a business consultant. And I thought, well, instead of getting book smarts, I should have real life experience. So I left. I said, all right, I'm going to try to find some business to do. I wasn't sure what. And the first thing that came my way was becoming a financial advisor, right? And this is right around 9/11 Y2K era, right? So perfect time to become a financial advisor. And there was no salary, it was all straight commission, that kind of thing. So I had to build a business, and I ended up just liking it. I ended up really liking being a business owner. And so I stayed, dropped out of college, never went back. I did try to go back once, but then they said, well, you haven't been back for 5 years, so you got to take a 1.5 years worth of courses. I said, well, screw that, not for a sociology degree. So I would make way more as an entrepreneur. And so that's what I did. And, I even, I was that financial advisor for probably about 4 years. And then I realized that stuff doesn't work. It's all bull crap. The whole save in mutual funds, 401ks, save it forever, and then someday you might retire. I ran the numbers. When I ran real life numbers in there, the reality, it never worked. You can never get somebody to retire unless they're like saving 100% of their income. So I thought, well, that's not good. Why am I selling this? I'm basically a deceiver, because I've been deceived myself believing this was true. So in 2006, I quit, vowed never to go back, never to teach about money again. I was just going to do mortgages as a mortgage broker and teach ballroom dancing, right? And as I was doing that, of course, I met other guys that were millionaires, self-made millionaires, guys that were in business and real estate. And that's kind of what got me on that journey. I was actually able to retire the first time in 2006. That same year after I quit, I was actually able to retire and get out of the rat race. And then I was like, well, what am I going to be when I grow up, right? What's that next step for me? And that's where in 2007, I kind of came out of retirement and said, all right, I'm going to start teaching people how to do it. And I went through the recession. I went from millionaire to upside down millionaire, was back in the rat race, had to claw my way back out, dug myself back out again, and then was able to retire 3 years ago again. And I've kind of been like this anti-financial advisor, as you said, right? Where, I've really been telling people to not do the traditional norm, but to do something different, like do things like real estate investing or, syndications or whatever it might be, or things that are alternative investments outside of the norm that any financial advisor would offer you.
It's incredible that you've gone through 2 cycles of financial freedom. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and why you had to go back into the workforce? Because a lot of people on this show, we talk about achieving the financial freedom, but we don't actually hear about the stories of people having to being sucked back into the workforce to then eventually become free again. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, when I came out of retirement in 2007, things were great. Things were awesome. I had multiple streams of income coming in, and then I was doing this more as a mission. I was working with a partner to do that. But what was interesting is that the people we were talking to were real estate investors, right? And they were more gambling real estate investors, not the good kind. And so between that and the fact that the partner I was working with at that time, he said, "Hey, I don't want you doing all these other streams of income. Why don't we cut those off and you focus on this?" So mistake number one, I cut off my multiple streams of income. Yeah. Mistake number two, even with my other investments, like with real estate and things like that, I wasn't worried about cash flow because there was so much appreciation. It's like, I could be negative equity, or negative cash flow, and I'll still be okay, right? Because I've got other streams of income coming in to kind of smooth it over. Well, that doesn't work when all of a sudden, you kind of stick that stick inside the bicycle spokes and you flip over the handlebars, right? And when everything stops that engine.
Right.
And that's what happened. I cut off these streams of income, and then all the people we're talking to and working with didn't have money either because they were real estate investors that were gambling. And so I just watched the whole thing just fall apart. And I went from, not even having to worry about money to a point where I was saying, dang, I'm in the hole $16,000 a month between my business and my personal expenses.
Wow.
And eventually I ended up being over $1 million in debt. And I had no money and no credit. So that's where I was like, crap, I came out of here the whole reason I came out of this is because I was out of the rat race to teach people to do the same thing. Well, now I'm back in it. And so to stay in integrity, just like the same reason I quit being a financial advisor, stay in integrity. I said, well, I can't tell people how to get out of the rat race, even though I'll do it again. Still, I feel like a schmuck. So instead I said, I'm just going to teach people how to do what I've already done, which is get resourceful, how to find the money to invest or whatever. Because that was what people were complaining about. They're saying, well, I just can't get access to money. But I had to get so creative during that time because I had no money and no credit. I had to find a way to do that to keep myself out of bankruptcy.
Right.
And so I started telling people how to do the same thing, how to, stop the money leaks and things like that and find money they didn't know they had. And that became kind of the focus of my business for several years, was just helping people find money and get resourceful, and then slowly, eventually I started to dig back out of it, pay off loans and debts and get myself to a positive cash flow place, and then started to build my portfolio again. Right. And that's where I was able to finally, December 2016, I looked at my numbers and said, all right, between my residual and my passive income streams, I'm out of the rat race again. So then I started bringing that theme more back into my teaching more recently, right?
So you never had to go back to a corporate job. You just the state of your economy with you in your own house was that you're not making ends meet, right?
Right, exactly. Like I actually tried getting a job. I remember I tried to get a paper delivery route at 4 a.m. because I thought, hey, I'm not working then, right?
Right.
And funny enough, they would never call back. I guess I'm that unemployable as an entrepreneur. So I just wanted to interrupt. It must have been pretty hard to have to go and do something like that, to go and apply for a job that you thought maybe not necessarily below you, but after achieving what you've achieved and knowing what you know, to go and have to do something mundane like a paper route. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I was trying to think of how to take care of my young family because I had a whole bunch of kids, that were needing me. My wife wasn't working outside the home. She was busy taking care of them. And it was rough because, her family, a lot of the in-laws, right, they were saying, hey, you should have finished your degree. That was stupid. Go back and finish your degree. Go get a good job. We knew you wouldn't be good as an entrepreneur, that kind of stuff, right? Even though I had been successful before, there was like, oh, that was, flash in the pan kind of thing, just go get a job, take care of your family. You can do that as a hobby on the side, right? And that never sat well with me. I mean, there was even a time where my wife at that time, we've now been divorced, but my wife at the time, she was like, maybe I should just take the kids and move in with my sister so you can figure stuff out.
Wow. If
you've ever seen the movie Cinderella Man with Russell Crowe, he was the boxer.
Oh yeah.
Same kind of thing happened to him, and it put him in this spiral of depression, right? And I was like, no, that's the worst thing you could do. And of course I was watching that movie at the time, so it was even worse because I'm like, that's me, So yeah, it was rough. Like, cause everybody's like, okay, you got to figure your crap out. And they were right. I did.
So what was the turning point? Like what mentally, how did you have to scrape the bottom of that barrel to know that your family's potentially going to leave you, you got no money, and what the hell are you going to do?
Yeah. I mean, that's where there's a few things. I mean, there's the financial side, but the mental side was the hardest part, right? So on the mental side, there was two books that really helped me out during that time. One of them was called Never Give Up by Donald Trump. I would call it his more humble or least egotistical books of the books he's written. He talks about some of his failures, right? Although he still somehow spins it to make it a success, right? But yeah, that was a good one for me, Never Give Up. And then there was another book called 3 Feet from Gold by Greg Reed and Sharon Lechter, who co-wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Mm-hmm. Great stories about how a lot of people would say, hey, it took me only 10 years to become an overnight success, right? And things like that. And just trying to find the positive. And I got to tell you, like, I felt like I knew that what I was going through, I would try to have this forward vision of thinking, there's got to be a purpose behind this. Like there's a bigger reason behind this. Like this is not an accident. This has to be happening to me for a reason. There's got to be, and the worse it gets, it's kind of like Napoleon Hill, right? With every adversity, there's a seed of a greater or equal opportunity.
Yep.
So I thought, well, if this is this bad, this sucks so hard. Like I can't imagine how awesome it's going to be on the other side of this, right? So I try to forward think to that. I was like, man, that's going to be awesome. Like, oh, this day was horrible. Man, this is going to be great. And even when collectors called, because I had multiple times a day collectors calling me to try to collect, right? And I had no money. So instead of avoiding their calls, I started answering the calls. Because I started calling them I love you calls. Because, the funny thing is friends and family, they started leaving when people were, when I was going through tough times. They would scatter, right? When things are good, they're all around me trying to figure out like, hey, that's awesome. What are you up to? But when things are going bad, then they're all just disappear. But those collectors, they never disappeared. They were calling every day. And so I would have to call like their old buddies. I'm like, hey, how's it going? Good. Mr. Miles is an attempt to collect on a debt. Yeah, I know. Can you pay us? Nope. When will you? No clue. Well, all right. Well, are you going to pay us? Yeah, someday. Okay. Well, we're going to keep calling. That's great. Looking forward to it. Thanks. Bye. And I wouldn't answer every one of their calls, but at least once a week or so for each of those companies, I would answer the phone because I started memorizing their numbers, and I knew who was calling me. And I would do that. And until the point where eventually I was able to say, guess what? I've got a little bit of money. You want to settle? I would start settling for pennies on the dollar, maybe like 20% or so. Mm-hmm. And so I started to, dig my way back out. And here's the thing is that as I started to do that and started to release the attachment of trying to hit my goals by a certain time or trying to fix my problems, I just got to the point I said, listen, like I know that these principles and the strategies that I teach work. If this takes 20 years, it takes 20 years. Whatever it's going to be, it's worth it. If it's God's will, awesome. Like I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing and hang in there. Mm-hmm. And right when I had that mental shift, especially where I got that place of submission, that's exactly when everything turned around. That's when all of a sudden the right relationships started showing up. And then I was able to use my talents and gifts to serve them. And they were centers of influence and they started spreading the word. And we went from almost bankrupt in 2009 in our company to all of a sudden by the next year, we did over 5 million in business, wow. And that's a big reason. It was, there's all the stuff of trying to be, a wise steward, watching my money, being careful with it, selling off whatever I could sell off to try to make ends meet, basically do everything, right? Other than selling my own blood, I wasn't selling plasma. I didn't go that far, but I was doing about whatever I could to make it work. And it finally was just a long enough period to stick in it that it worked. It did.
It's an incredible what you just said there, the attachment to hit my goals. I think that is so important in our pursuit of quote unquote success, given what the age we live in of the instant gratification that, people are so caught up with the blinkers on and they have to hit this goal by a certain time. And if they don't mm-hmm. hit it, they'll quit. Right. I interview so many people and I see so many people, who don't have the right mindset on the front end and that 3 feet from goal. Like it's mm-hmm. okay that it takes you 5 years or 6 years or 8 years or 10 years or 20 years. People who achieve financial freedom in 18 or 24 months, they're freaks, right? Don't listen to the hype. It took me, I picked up the book Rich Dad Poor Dad in 2009. I didn't become financially free in 2017, right? Like that, it took, and that's me moving to a whole new country and doing the whole bloody, all the thing. But it was hustling, right?
Yeah.
And it's okay. That was my journey. Now, if I'd given up, if I'd said I was going to do it, and there was tough times, right? There were mentally tough times of like, this is not working, or what the hell am I doing? Or I'm burning myself at both ends because I'm trying to get a full-time job. I've got my full-time job and I'm trying to make it work on the side. But at the end of the day, it's to your point of like surrendering to the fact that it might take a little bit longer, and that is okay. Right. I have so many people who are like, Reed, would you change anything you do? Or God, I wish I'd started investing 20 years ago. I tell them, guys, stop talking like that, because you're here today showing up, and the next 20 years are going to be freaking incredible. Your last 20 years brought you to this point, and that's okay. And you need to be okay with that, because if you keep walking around with a dark shadow around you thinking, oh, poor me, then you're never going to be able to go and do, crush the next 20 years of your life. So I think it's super important. But back to the detaching, a lot of people have time associated with goals.
Yes.
Where I start looking as targets. There is a target out there in time that I want to hit something, right? Whatever it is. Does it? And someone said to me one time, and I would love your opinion on this, and it's to do with multifamily real estate investing, but it's like, when you're sitting at 80 years of age with your grandchildren, does it really matter to them if you had 5,000 units in 2020 or 10,000 units in 2030? Does it really matter? And the answer is no, it doesn't. No, that to me, that gives me a little bit of goosebumps right now, because it's like, it's so true, right? And and then you got to put it in perspective. And so I just wanted to add that a little bit in there, because I'm so passionate about that type of stuff.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's coming back to that same book, 3 Feet from Gold, right? They interviewed Truant Cathy, who's the owner of Chick-fil-A. And Truant Cathy, he actually says, don't plan, which is completely counterintuitive, especially for people that are planners, right? And even for me, like I would try to map things out, like try to hit goals and stuff. He's like, no, you have a vision that you set out there, like you're saying, a target, right? You set it out there. It could be like a 5-year vision or longer.
A 10-year vision.
It could be a 10-year. Yeah, it could be longer than that. But it's the important thing is, he's like, I don't care about, hitting targets or whatever along the way. He's like, all I need to know is the next step towards that vision. That's all I need to know. And that's kind of what I started to adopt. I stopped trying to put time frames on it, trying to make a lot of money, by this time or that. All I look for is improvement. Is like, am I just keep progressing? It's like that flywheel concept, right? Where you're pedaling a bicycle, it gets easier and easier. You got to keep shifting and shifting, and you go faster and faster. Some people are just trying to like get in that worst gear possible, and they're like standing up on the bike, trying to push the pedals, trying to get it going, instead of saying, no, just get in first gear, just get it moving. You'll progress. You'll get there, like just enjoy the ride. Yeah, I think that's the key.
So Chris, what tools and tricks do you have up your sleeve that you can share with our audience about that sort of stuff? Just getting started. And maybe the second part of the question is, if people are listening to this and they're in that, working full time and trying to hustle and got the family and trying to do it all, what advice can you give them to make sure that they're realizing that they are moving that needle in the right direction? It might not be as quickly as they want, but they are still moving the needle in the right direction.
Absolutely. The biggest thing is, like what I mentioned before, is what's that next step for you, right? So many people, like, give you an example. I had a business owner that I was coaching. He was making about $150,000 a year in his business. Now, granted, this guy was in his early 20s. So I was super proud of what he's already accomplished. But his goal for the next year was $1 million, right? And I had to get in his face a little bit, because he was just so sold on $1 million. And I finally decided to say, I'm like, I'm sorry, but you're not mentally in a place to make $1 million. Like, you're not there yet. You have to get yourself there to do that. And I'm like, maybe I see you actually about 200,000 to 300,000. That's where I see you mentally going to. And his wife even piped in. She's like, that's not acceptable. I'm like, well, okay, let's flash forward. Let's just say this year you make 300,000. What would you think about that? Like, absolutely not. That would be horrible. I'm like, 300,000. You haven't even hit 25 yet. Do you know how many 45-year-olds would love to make 300,000? 50-year-olds, right? Like, you're not putting this right perspective. And so they're just like, oh, and they were mad, and we never had a client call again after that. Funny enough, he finally apologized to me this last year. He's like, I see what you're doing now. His business pretty much collapsed. Like, after that, it actually just completely almost shut down. and he's rebuilding again, And I think that's the thing is you got to know what that next step is that, if you've never made 10,000 a month before, well then cool. Well, maybe that's your next step. Or if you've never made 5,000, maybe then 5,000 a month should be the next step. Same thing with passive income. Like, cool. Like maybe you've made a couple $100 a month. Cool. 1,000. Maybe your goal is 20,000 a month. Because I get people all the time to say, Chris, my goal is 10,000, 20, 30,000 a month. How do I get there as quickly as possible with the assets I have, right? And I'll consult people on that. But a lot of times, like, just look for that next step. Like, if you're at a couple $100 a month, get to 1,000 a month. If you're at 1,000, get to 2,000. If you're at 2,000, maybe get to 5, and just keep stretching it. And if you stretch it out, and you start to keep just going step by step, and get yourself mentally there, where by the time you hit that number, you'll say, "Oh, okay, I was already expecting that. I already knew it." Right? I think I remember I had a friend once that said, sometimes people think something is possible. Eventually you'll progress from possible to probable to, eventually if you get it to the right place, it becomes inevitable, right? It's not just possible, probable, it becomes inevitable. It's a point where you say, this is just what's going to happen. Right. And the same thing happened to me when I went from like 10,000 to 20,000 a month. And then when I went from 20 to 50, right? Like I remember thinking 50 was like absolutely crazy, but now it's like, cool. Like why not 100,000 a month? Like why not more? It's stages. You just got to keep yourself going to that next step.
Yeah, and I think what you're underlying there is, and probably to that 25-year-old and his wife were too busy looking at Grant Cardone and the 10X rule, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that's where we're talking about today for the listeners out there, that it's a target. 10X is a target. It's not tied to time, right? Mm-hmm. That's where people get frustrated. Like that example you just mentioned, he was frustrated at you because he's like, I wanted it in a year. It's like, you're only at $150,000. You're timesing that by what, 7 point, whatever it is, 7, whatever the math is.
7 times. Yeah.
Yeah. 7 times. Like that's huge, but maybe that's between now and when you're 30 or 35. Like, let's look at that next step. And it's okay to have that 10X goal in a, or we'll call it not goal, target, because target is not associated with time. And then look at that. Okay, well, let's go 150 and let's just double it. Let's go and let's simply just go and double. What does that mean? And what does that mean from my sales point of view? What does that mean? How many widgets do I have to sell per day? Does that mean I've got to go double my current sales right now? Well, just doubling current sales, what is that going to mean? Breaking it all down in terms of understanding the numbers behind, not necessarily numbers, but the steps to go out and then take that little step, right?
That's
right. To go out and double the services or the business or whatever it might be. I think, but also the second part of what you're saying there is really important about training yourself to, and I talk a lot about it on the show. You've got to back yourself, right? And it becomes inevitable. I want this to happen. It's not like, when is it going to happen? Sorry, it's not as if it's going to happen. It's like, just when is it going to happen? I know, that's right. It's changing that mindset and not always about being too in your own mind and backing yourself to say, I've got the know-how to go out and do this. I wanted to achieve this in the future. I'm smart enough, ugly enough to go out and figure it out, right? And that's something that people don't work on enough, right? They don't back themselves enough because they're too scared of their own bloody shadow. So,
that's true.
Coronavirus being one of them. So, but what are the other things that you can tell people that you do in a daily habit that just help break down the day or the week so people feel like they're progressing?
Yeah. I mean, one, like I start out the day, I always have a morning routine that I do where I get out and move, right? Whatever that looks like for you, but I get out and exercise. Like I'm a runner. I eventually got myself to the point where I became a marathoner, right?
Wow.
Didn't start out that way, but trust me, I was 30, 40 pounds heavier than I am now. So that's something that can happen over time. I'm healthier now in my 40s than I was in my 30s, but doing that kind of stuff, reading good books or listening to podcasts, like you're probably doing right now, like even if it's on your commute, doing things to feed your mind and your body in a way, good sleep, good water, good nutrition, doing all those things that actually help foster an abundance mindset, keeps your mind clear, keeps it going the right thing. Because here's the thing, the average person that wakes up, they basically barely roll out of bed, lucky if they shower. They drink their morning coffee and then they drive off to work like zombies. And then hopefully by 2 p.m. they're awake, right? And they've lost this entire day of productivity where you could start the day off right, where you win. And that's what I did. Like even during those hardest times, I would still keep doing that morning routine because I thought I need a win. I need something to say, hey, by 7 or 7:30 a.m., I've won for the day. I may not be perfect and there might be more crap ahead of me, but at least now I'm a winner. Now I'm successful. I'm breathing, I'm living, I'm not even broke because, hey, I'm still alive. I can still do what I want to some level, right? But, I'm able to freely choose, and I think that's critical with no matter where you are in your life, doing something like that, getting the right headspace. And then you'll be able to see more opportunities that most people will miss because they're too much like zombies.
But in and around that, people are so zombie-esque because of some of their crap that they do in the morning. Let's be honest, right? Like you wake up and you instantly turn on Facebook, you instantly turn on Instagram.
Sure.
Like I would encourage everyone to set your timer that you don't have it come on till after 8 o'clock and see if you can wake up at 7 and spend the first hour not looking at your phone. Take the dog for a walk, practice some deep breathing, go do some exercise. Do something. Just have a quiet point in your day or a point that can be a rock that can anchor the day to help you go off and be successful rather than just diving straight into the emails or straight into technology. Because I think having that quiet time in the morning, and there's so many different ways to do it. I work out as well. There's also meditation, there's deep breathing, there's walking the dog, there's just sitting on a stoop with a coffee, looking at a gaze into nothingness, just to get a little bit of to center yourself. But there's so many different things to do, but try and use the morning period to not look at your phone. I think a lot of people just wake up and do that and hence get into that zombie mode too quickly and too easily. So
I completely agree. It's all about doing, really, if you want to find success in anything, just do the opposite of what everybody else is doing, right?
Exactly.
If we are looking at the average person, even the average American, I mean, their lives are pretty monotonous. They're working their 9 to 5 or 9 to 7 job in some cases, right? Or longer. I mean, they're just working themselves to the bone. They have no real freedom. They dream of freedom and they might even make good money, but they still don't have freedom. And I'll tell you, every time when I've worked with clients, like the biggest part for people, the biggest hindrance to their freedom is usually what's going on in their head, more so than the strategy. The strategy to help somebody map out a plan to get out of the rat race and find the right investments and stuff, that's actually easy. Because if you got the right mindset, you see it too. And you're like, oh, got it, versus like somebody I just talked to where they're like, oh man, we've lost 10% in the stock market because of a virus. But I mean, should we stay in it? I'm like, why? It sucks. The market sucks. It's done 7.5% average for the last 30 years. Why do you want to be a part of that with that bipolar nature that you can't control? You're at the mercy of it when you could be doing real estate, making double-digit returns. Like, that's just stupid in my mind. But they're like, we're going to have to think about it. Like, I don't know. Like, you can think about when you lose another $30,000 out of your $300,000, congratulations. That's what happens, and people get caught in that stuck routine of what everybody else does. And the way to freedom is essentially doing the opposite, seeing what's out there, seeing that opportunity, looking with different eyes. And then the path to get there, the how-to, it's actually really easy.
Yeah, it's Einstein's formula, E = mc squared. I'm a math geek. You have the constant, which is the M, right? The constant is going to be the strategy, the real estate or the investing or whatever. It's constant. It's not going to change much. The C squared is the mentality, right? That's the variable, and it's up to us as humans. And it's that 80-20 rule, right? Like that C squared is so powerful in this analogy because it's you. It's what's going on between your ears that's causing you to say, I need to think about it, or I'm going to get back to you, or I'm going to sleep on it, or and here's the thing: it boils down to is don't be a fool and continue to learn. Like people get to the stage where they think they know it all, right? Because everyone's telling them, "Yeah, you're doing a great job," and this is exactly what you got to do, and invest in the stock market, invest in mutual funds, and blah 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 blah. And then when it goes bad, because they haven't continued to learn, right? And I think the reading the books, the podcasts, the meditation, the constant pursuit of learning and being, open enough to take on more information as you grow older is really important as well. And so you are moving with the times, right? You are, as the wave of change comes, inevitably with a new recession coming through, the way in which you have money in the future is not to be a fool. And I remember my dad always used to say to me, a fool and that money are easily parted. So don't be a fool. Go out and be educated. So, but Chris, I want to wrap up the show with you telling me how your 17 secrets to free up cash today. It was one of the little topics that was on the info sheet. I was actually really wanting to understand what are 17 ways people can free up cash in today's world.
Well, it's actually supposed to be 7. That's a typo there. But,
all right, let's go with 7. But 17.
I probably could come up with 17, but let's just give you a few because, like you said, we want to wrap it up and get there. So I'll just power punch you with it. So, 1, tracking your money, right? Like when I was going through those hard times, when I finally started to look at my money and not just track expenses, income and expenses. Because understand that savers who are in scarcity and can never become financially free, they only look at the expenses, but they ignore the income. Spenders who are also not financially free and in scarcity look at income, but ignore the expenses, right? A steward, which is in the middle, who's the only one that actually can be abundant, they see both. They say, how can I increase that income and how can I be efficient with my expenses, right? And so I'll tell you, like I had somebody they just started tracking here recently. And when all was said and done, we're like, you can still have a good lifestyle and do almost the same things you've been doing, but just because you're watching your money, will probably free up $2,000 a month. That's $24,000 a year. That even if you just buy a single family home, that's like a single family home a year you could be buying with that. That could turn into something pretty significant, Right. So I'm like, that's just a little stuff. So, that's 1, and that's a good first step. 2 is don't be afraid of debt, but be efficient with it too, right? So respect it, but don't fear it. I use an index, I call it a cash flow index, where I take the balance of that loan, I divide it by the minimum monthly payment, and it'll give me a number, right? So for example, say I have a $10,000 credit card, it's $200 a month, but then I also have a $10,000 car loan that's $500 a month. Now, naturally, if the credit card's a higher interest, the Dave Ramsey's of the world will say, pay off that credit card, right? Get rid of it. They'll say pay off everything. But I'll look at it and say, well, based on this, like if I pay off that $200 a month credit card, that's an index of 50. 10,000 divided by 200 is 50. But 10,000 divided by 500 on the car loan is 20. The lower the number, the more I want to pay it off. So if I have 10 grand, I'm not going to pay off the credit card. I'm going to pay off the car that frees up 500 a month, gives me more flexibility and freedom. And I can choose to do what I want with that money rather than just freeing up 200, right?
Right.
So I've used that with people. So sometimes we're like, hey, the debts you have, pay minimum payments, you're good because these are good numbers. Some of these others, let's pay these off first, and so I'll do that. Another one, taxes is a huge one, right? Especially if you start going into investing. Real estate for one is already awesome, but if you can find anything that we can create business side income, whatever it might be, you can write off so much stuff. You can even do like the whole Augusta rule, right? The corporate rent where you can pay for the use of your house one day at a time. Now, as long as you don't exceed over 14 days a year, you can take that money tax-free, right? So say, for example, you charge $1,000 a day for the use of your house, just like it was like an Airbnb, but you charge your company to do that. That means you could say you did it one day a month. That's $12,000 you can have as a business write-off, but the expense, the cool thing is that's an expense on the business, but the income is totally tax-free. That's $12,000 a year you could take, saves you in the ballpark of somewhere about $5,000 in taxes. So things like that you can do. So there's all kinds of ways to do it. Essentially, it comes down to how do we, again, watch increased income. Can we create more passive income with the assets we have? Can we reduce our expenses and be efficient, whether it's with debt or taxes or whatever it might be?
Love it. No, I love all of those ones, and particularly the cash flow index. I think that's really, really powerful to look at the monthly, just for those people out there, the balance of a loan divided by the minimum monthly payment, and the lower that number is, the more attention you need to pay to it. So I think that's a really great little tidbit there for gold piece of nugget, gold nugget in there. So, mate, at the end of every show, we like to do a lightning round. It's called the top 5 investing tips. You ready to get into it?
Let's do it.
Mate, what is a daily habit you practice to keep on track towards your goals?
Daily habit is, like I said, that morning routine, that morning ritual I do.
Morning routine. And it specifically about writing stuff down and meditation, was that right? Or exercise?
Yeah, there's meditation as part of that too. It's reviewing the goals, tracking my progress. Yep.
Awesome. Do you use any particular app with that or just writing it on a piece of paper?
Usually it could be paper, could be Excel, or I got like a little notepad app on my phone that I use to keep a list. So I'll do that too.
Something just to check in. I think is super important. Now, question number 2, who is the most influential person in your career to date?
Oh man. I would say that person is a guy that nobody's probably ever heard of. His name is Les McGuire. And he actually died in a plane wreck in 2006. He basically was doing the same thing I'm doing now. And then right when he was about to get big, he died in a plane wreck. And I remember actually it was 2006. Remember, I just got to the point I could retire. I went to his funeral and it hit me so hard. I was like, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to pass on that legacy. And so that's really what keeps me going to today and moving that vision way beyond wherever he was.
That's awesome. Question number 3 is, in your business, is there an influential tool that you use on a daily basis? And when I say tool, it could be software or it could be a physical tool like a phone or pen and paper. Like what's the number one tool that you use in your business today?
Excel.
Oh, yeah.
I guess I just, again, tracking and watching and monitoring, because whatever you monitor grows, whatever you ignore will decay. Right.
Yep. Love it. In one sentence, what's been the biggest failure in your career to date? And what did you learn from that failure?
Not listening to my gut.
Not listening to your gut. Love it.
Yeah. My intuition has made better business decisions than anything, even if it went against advice from even mentors that I've had. Right. But I'll tell you, like, my business is the way it is today. And it's grown so much because I ignored what some people had told me would be common sense business stuff, but it wasn't the right fit for my business.
Right. Mate, last question is, where can people reach you to continue the conversation? They want to be in your sphere a little bit more. Where do they go?
Yeah, they can check out my podcast. I have a show called The Chris Miles Money Show. And I've got that on iTunes or whatever your favorite podcast app is. Or you can go to my website, moneyripples.com. That's MONEYRIPPLES.com. And you can check out, there's more information there, including those 7 secrets to free up cash today. There's an ebook you can actually download for yourself.
Awesome, mate. Well, look, I want to thank you so much for taking some time out of your day. I just want to quickly reflect some of the things that I took away from today's interview, because I'm madly writing it all down here in front of me. But I think the number one thing that I took away was your ability to get up back off the ground after having to go back through some pretty dark times, it sounds like, earlier on in your career, and having the resolve to back yourself. You're one of the 3rd or 4th interviews I've done in the last little while where people have had that failure. Like they've gone to the heights of success and then they've crashed back down and lost family, lost health, lost other things, and having to rebuild and making sure that all the pillars in life are fulfilled and sustained. So it's not just relying on that one pillar, because if that one pillar goes, then you've got nothing else to support you. I think that's really, really awesome. And then the last one, I really like the cash flow index. I thought that was a cool little math equation there, because the balance of the loan divided by the minimum monthly payment. For those people listening out there, check your current credit card situations. It's a cool thing you can do right now, and focus on the ones with the lowest number. So did I leave anything out?
That was beautiful. I love it,
mate. Well, again, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to jump on this show. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we will catch up very, very soon. Well, there you have it. Another cracking episode jam-packed with some incredible advice from Chris. If you do want to get into his sphere, make sure you check out his podcast and head over to moneyripples.com. He has a wealth of information over there about the 7 secrets to free up cash flow in today's world. I want to thank you all again for taking some time out of your day to continue to grow your financial IQ, because that's what we're all about here on this show. And we're going to do it all again next week. So be bold, be brave, and remember, go give life a crack.